Hello YouTube. Can a mini be painted in simple block colors? Does it need painted highlights and shadows? These are the questions I hope to answer in this video. We have some board game minis, a starter paint set, and some brushes. Can we just keep it simple and get these minis painted? The short and obvious answer is yes. Of course we can. I find that contrast is the most important part to making this look as good as it can, at least for me and in my experience anyway. Contrast between colors and sometimes even just black lining between similar colors or sections of the same color can help bring out the details. Here I am painting with neutral grey, being careful to leave black in the recesses or at the very edge of the detail. This will save me black lining later. In this video I'll be painting the Gnomad faction from the Wildlands board game. I will only be painting in block colors and possibly black lining. No highlights, shadows, or techniques like dry brushing. That all takes additional time and practice. If you are just looking to start painting minis or have a few board games that you are thinking about painting, this can be a good way to start. That's not to suggest that this style of painting is only for beginners. It's a great way to keep it simple and get your minis painted. Here I am applying brown rose, leaving the black in the recess, which acts as a good demarcation between the blue. This could also be achieved by black lining later. However, being careful this way saves time in the future. This is a great way to bring out the details and make the flat colors stand out. For me, I find it harder to get good results with darker color schemes because the black lining kind of just blends into the other colors. All the details kind of just end up being hidden. That is where painting in the shadows and highlights or just using contrast paints like speed paints really helps those darker color schemes pop. Here I blackline between the grey sections of this mini's mechanical legs, and then I use burnt umber as a secondary colour to add additional contrast. I could have just painted the whole thing grey, but then the details would just start to blend into each other. I mix a little bit of sky blue with neutral grey to get a light grey blue colour to paint this mini shirt. This will take 2 coats to get smooth coverage over the black primer. You will find most light colours will take at least 2 coats to get even coverage over black. This is normal, at least for the majority of paints I've tried. In this mini's artwork, he is wearing a patterned shirt, so I've tried to make a colour that is similar to the lightest colour on that shirt. That way, if I decide to add stripes later, I'll be adding darker colours that will only require 1 coat. Yellow is a colour that is notoriously difficult to paint over black, often taking more than 3 or 4 coats to get decent coverage. This is pretty normal for most paint ranges. Sometimes it's easier to do an initial coat of light brown to help give the yellow a good base to start from. In saying that, here I am just laying down this Sahara yellow straight onto the black primer, and the coverage for the first coat is actually pretty good. It was at this point in recording that I decided to experiment with a new background to try and solve my exposure and focus issues. Switching to this light background, I found the improvement was instant, solving most of my previous issues. This has been an interesting part of this learning experience for me, and while it may have been obvious to someone with more camera experience, I am just glad that I have finally found a solution I am happy with. Despite my initial excitement about the coverage, it still took 3 coats of this yellow to get a nice smooth finish. For yellow though, this is still pretty good. Because it can get a little messy applying 3 coats of yellow, once again I tidy up the edges with black before I start the next colour. That next colour is going to be neutral grey. It offers a good contrast to the yellow without being a harsh change in colour value. In the next video I am going to add just a little bit of detail to each mini to really make them stand out on the game board. So stay tuned for that. Using greys and browns is a great way to add contrast to a mini without adding colour. This will help emphasise only the colours that you want to stand out while keeping the mini from looking like a rainbow. This can also be done by using light and dark versions of any colour, but that way you can end up with competing colours trying to draw your attention. This mini for example has multiple brown tones, but all they do is help the green skin tone stand out. This mini is another good example. Other than the spanner and belt buckle, technically everything else is a different shade of brown. From the brown rose skin tone, medium rust beard, deep brown cloak, the black red boots and belt, even the burnt umber pants are a shade of brown. This adds plenty of contrast, helping each detail stand out without any colour overpowering the other. And that's it. Using only block colours, the Gnomad faction is complete. Even though it may look like there are some subtle shadows and highlights in these reveal photos, they were not painted in. That is just from the natural lighting casting shadows on the mini. Overall, this is a nice fun way to paint minis simply and quickly. I think they do a good job in resembling the card artwork, and that was always the goal. While I am more than happy with how these turned out, and should probably just stop here and put them back in the box, in the next video I will go over a couple of simple techniques on each of these minis to bring out some of the details and really help them stand out on the game board. So stay tuned for that. See you next time, and thanks for watching.